United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. This designation will impose further sanctions and penalties on North Korea and related persons and supports our maximum pressure campaign to isolate the murderous regime.
Our starting point this morning, the Trump administration has designated North Korea as a terror sponsor in a move aimed at dialing up pressure on that regime for its nuclear and missile developments. The redesignation comes in 9 years after Pyongyang's name was removed from the list, and with it, North Korea now joins Iran, Sudan, and Syria on the blacklist. Our Yoo Jun-hee starts us off.
During a cabinet meeting on Monday, President Donald Trump announced the U.S. will designate North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Saying it should have happened a long time ago, Trump accused the regime of supporting international terrorism, in addition to threatening the world with nuclear devastation.
This designation will impose further sanctions and penalties on North Korea and related persons and supports our maximum pressure campaign to isolate the murderous regime.
He cited the murder of Kim Jong Un's half-brother in Malaysia earlier this year by a pair of individuals suspected of acting under orders from North Korea. Trump also referred to the death of American student Otto Warmbier, who was detained by Pyongyang for over a year and a half, as well as other victims of North Korean oppression and brutality. He said the Treasury Department will announce the additional sanctions soon, which he promised will be of the highest level. The U.S. president ended his remarks by urging North Korea to be lawful and bring an end to its illegal nuclear and ballistic missile developments. Pyongyang's reinstatement on Washington's list of terror sponsors comes 9 years after its removal by the George W. Bush administration as part of a denuclearization deal which ultimately failed. North Korea joins Iran, Sudan, and Syria on the blacklist, which bars them from receiving U.S. aid, in addition to tougher financial restrictions.
Fox News alert for you. The United States officially labeling North Korea a state sponsor of terror. Amy Kellogg is live for us in Milan with what exactly that label means. Good morning, Amy.
Yes, Heather. Well, it may be more symbolic than anything else because, as you know, North Korea is so heavily sanctioned as it is. But according to the Secretary of State, it may, in fact, actually dissuade some third parties who are still doing business with the rogue regime to stop engaging with Pyongyang. And President Trump has said that he, in fact, will start announcing some sanctions over the next 2 weeks. They will be rolled out to further squeeze Kim Jong Un and his regime, though Trump hasn't said what they will be. President Trump has said the designation of state sponsor of terror should have applied years ago to North Korea. And in fact, it was. But it was removed by President George W. Bush in 2008. The other 3 countries on that list are Sudan, Syria, and Iran. President Trump invoked the name of Otto Warmbier, the American college student who was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor after tearing down a propaganda poster while visiting North Korea last year. He returned home in a coma earlier this year, only to die a short time after arrival. Another dramatic example of the sheer brutality of the regime, the murder by female agents bearing nerve agents of the North Korean leader's half-brother Kim Jong Nam in a Malaysian airport earlier this year in broad daylight. Now, the South Korean spy agency, meanwhile, is warning that North Korea could well test a barrage of missiles before the end of the year to flex its muscles. A North Korean news outfit said over the weekend that the U.S. will be sorry for, quote, letting such a depraved and stupid guy occupy the Oval Office. Now, Heather, President Trump has been hinting for some time that he wanted to put North Korea on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, but he clearly waited for the end of his very important 5-nation tour of Asia, during which time, as you know, he spent great effort to try to bring the parties together, the other Asian countries, to come up with sort of a unified message and ways to put pressure on the North Korean regime. Heather.
Yeah, and I was reading about the North Korean military member that escaped and managed to get to South Korea, and it was infested with parasites and worms. So many things going on in North Korea that we're not aware of. Thank you so much, Amy. Appreciate it.
All right, a Fox News alert, President Trump declaring North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism and slapping this rogue nation with the highest level of sanctions possible. Here now to discuss that, Hudson Institute senior fellow Rebecca Heinrichs. Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Good morning.
First thing we want to do is pull up exactly what North Korea did to earn this new title, and here are the list of offenses. Helped Syria build nuclear reactor, worked with Iran on missile development, and also allegations that North Korea has ties to Hamas and Hezbollah, terrorist organizations working in the Middle East. This new, I guess, whatever you would call it, you're calling them now a state sponsor of terrorism, comes with this added pressure on the country. But the pressure was already pretty tough on North Korea, right?
The pressure is already tough, and remember, the Trump administration was able to successfully get these UN Security Council resolutions passed in the summer, which are the heaviest, most biting sanctions that have ever been levied against North Korea. But this designation is important because President Bush removed the designation in 2008 as an incentive to try to convince the North Koreans that the diplomatic talks might be in its favor, and then within a year, North Korea tested another nuclear weapon. So this is, again, just to try to turn up the pressure and to dissuade other countries from doing business with North Korea. It's very difficult to explain how countries can continue doing business with a state sponsor of terrorism like North Korea.
Absolutely. Let's look at the company that they keep in this new designation: Syria, Iran, and also Sudan in North Africa. So these are three places that, and now four that are on this list. My question to you is, President Bush dropped them off the list in 2008, trying to kind of do things diplomatically. They build that bomb, like you said, they test that bomb. This has been a continuing problem with this country. There needs to be a new direction on this. Am I right about that?
You are, and that's why the Trump administration's strategy towards North Korea is to use all of the tools in our toolbox, short of military force, to exhaust all of this. This is all part of diplomacy. Diplomacy isn't just talks; it's everything short of military force. And so, the Trump administration gets a lot of criticism for using inflammatory language. The president uses inflammatory language towards North Korea, et cetera. But what he's trying to do, he's trying to change the calculation of Kim to finally get to the point where he says, enough. This is exhausting all of our finances to spend on our nuclear missile program, and it's not worth it. And so that's what he's trying to do, and to convince China also that we're serious about this and that it needs to help.
The pressure has to come from China and Russia to really cut them off, because, again, if they just say, okay, we're going to stop building nuclear weapons, they're going to do the same thing they did in 2008. So something definitely needs to change. Let's go to
Meanwhile, President Trump's top nuclear commander says if he got an order for what he would consider an illegal launch, he would reject it. While speaking at a security conference in Nova Scotia on Saturday, General John Hyten noted even the commander-in-chief's power has its limits.
The way the process works is it's simple. I provide advice to the president. He'll tell me what to do, and if it's illegal, guess what's going to happen?
You say no.
I'm going to say, Mr. President, it's illegal. And guess what he's going to do? He's going to say, what would be legal? And we'll come up with options of a mix of capabilities to respond to whatever the situation is. And that's the way it works.
Joining me now on set is CBS News Radio military analyst Mike Lyons. Mike, thanks for being here.
Hi.
Let's start off with the president's announcement. What is the significance of making North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism?
Well, they actually were on the list, and the Obama administration took them off to try to bring them to the table. But these are just additional sanctions that we'll put now on North Korea. We'll never sell them any arms. It'll be no diplomatic type operations, any dual purpose things that they could use for military access, we won't sell them. So to go with the sanctions that we already have on them, it's really just a formality. Now, this is a State Department designation that 3 other nations are on as well. You've got Iran, you've got Sudan, and you've got Syria.
Cuba was recently removed, correct?
Cuba recently removed. And again, this was by the previous administration, and it's used to negotiate, get them to the table to bargain. And that's why the Obama administration took them off.
What is North Korea's response likely to be?
Well, they'll probably respond rhetorically as they do. They are not interested in getting to the table right now because the race is on for them to develop this nuclear capability as well as the missile technology they have. They feel that they won't be able to negotiate from any position of strength until they have that capability and can demonstrate it. So they're going to likely try to hold themselves up and not respond in a manner to get to the table because they don't want to negotiate.
Now, what do you make of General Hyten's comments of resisting an illegal nuke action by the president?
Wasn't surprised by his comments. They are all about the law of land warfare, which is all about military necessity, distinction, making sure we only attack military targets, and then also proportionality. There are those who argue that a first strike use of a nuclear weapon is illegal, especially against a country that we don't know has them or could strike back at us. But his comments are in line with what I would expect the STRATCOM commander, the four-star that does that. The bottom line is the president just can't wake up and order the bombing of North Korea, a city, for example, that would kill millions of civilians without any real military necessity behind it.
Sure. Now, can you walk us through the chain of command as it stands now when it comes to ordering nuclear strikes?
So those procedures were developed during the Cold War, and in most cases in response to a counterattack to somebody attacking us. So the process is somewhat complex, but it's designed to respond very quickly within literally minutes should somebody launch a nuclear strike against the U.S. But for a preemptive strike, it's a little bit different. You'd have to go through different military channels, and in some cases you would hope that you'd have these procedures already worked out on some level. But the bottom line is this: the president is the sole authority for making this strike, legitimate or not. He decides the strike is going to go. He sends an authentication code to the Pentagon. And from there now, the authentication to actually fire the weapon system requires two-person control. You need at least two people on both sides of this process to make sure they have the right codes and the right procedures in order to launch a nuclear weapon.
Who would those people be? Who would those two people be?
So in different services, it's either those in the Navy with submarines, in the Air Force with Minuteman ballistic missiles, but they have these safes that are down at the lowest levels where those things are stored, and they would get the authentication codes, and again, both of them together create the kind of capability that we release the missile. So there's not a chance for, let's say, mutiny, for example. Along the way, let's say the president delivers an illegal order, and let's say he fires that person who refuses to bring it down, brings in somebody, colludes at that top level. The bottom line is, as the message goes through the chain of command, at some point, the two people could say that's an illegal order, so we can't authenticate that message. They'll go back up to the top.
So there are safety mechanisms in place.
Yeah, there are. Again, it's all about the illegality of that order based on proportionality, military necessity, and whether or not the U.S. is imminently threatened.
Right. Now, of course, we all remember the president's promises for fire and fury under certain circumstances. Do the general's comments dial that back a little bit?
Well, I think the general's comment tried to explain what the chain of command is and what things would look like. I think in our conventional war capability, we would likely start something, if you think about that. Again, but starting a conventional war with North Korea has so many other tremendous implications at this point. But I do believe that from the United States' perspective, previous administrations, for example, have had a no-use first-strike nuclear policy, which somewhat makes sense against especially other countries that don't have that capability. You'd violate the law of land warfare.
Right. All right. Well, Mike Lyons, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks.